I thought I was driving home for Thanksgiving dinner just to keep the peace. But the second I stepped through the door, I realized they did not call me back because they missed me. They called because they needed something. That night, one click turned me into the town joke. I just never expected that by the time I was done with them, I would turn my own family into breathless defendants. My name is Mara Whitlock, and at 32 years old, I should have known better than to hope for a miracle. The drive from my quiet apartment in Cedar Haven to my parents' house in Briarwood took 2 hours of white-knuckling the steering wheel. I listened to upbeat holiday jazz to drown out the anxiety tightening in my chest. I told myself this year would be different. I was an adult now, with a career and a life of my own. I was not the scared little girl they used to order around. I balanced a bottle of expensive Cabernet and a box of artisan pastries from the best bakery in the city in my arms. I rang the bell. "My mother, Gloria, open the door." She didn't smile. She didn't say hello. She just looked at the wine. "Give me that," she said, snatching the bottle before I could even step inside. Her eyes raked over my coat and boots like she was inspecting a discount rack item for defects. "You look tired. I hope you didn't bring cheap wine again." I stepped into the hallway. The air smelled of sage and roasting meat, but it felt cold. My father, Gordon, walked out of the living room. He didn't hug me. He didn't ask how the drive was. He looked at his watch and gave a dry, humorless chuckle. "Well, look who finally decided to show up." Gordon said, "You're just in time. The kitchen is short-staffed." He tossed a stained, floral apron at me. It hit my chest with a soft thud. It was not a request. It was a command. "Hurry up! Mara," he added, turning his back on me. "Tessa invited her friends over, and your mother's behind schedule." I looked past him into the living room. My older brother, Miles, and my younger sister, Tessa, were lounging on the beige sectional. They were laughing at something on a phone screen. Tessa held a glass of wine, my wine. I realized and didn't even look up to acknowledge me. Miles glanced over, smirked, and then raised his phone as if to film my arrival, but then lost interest. They were dressed in their best clothes. I was still in my coat, holding a crumpled apron. I walked into the kitchen. It was a disaster zone. Pots were piled in the sink and flour dusted the counters. Gloria thrust a piece of lined notebook paper into my hand. "Here," she said, not making eye contact as she checked her reflection in the microwave door. "The turkey needs basting every 20 minutes. The potatoes aren't mashed. The gravy needs to be started from scratch, not the packet stuff, and wipe down the counters before the guests come in here." I looked at the list. It was enough work for 3 people. "Mom," I said, my voice feeling small in my throat. "I just got here. Can I at least sit down for a minute?" Gloria turned sharply. "Sit down. We have guests. Mara, stop being lazy." She swept out of the room to join Tessa's friends, leaving me alone with the heat of the ovens. I tied the apron strings. They cut into my waist. For the next hour, I chopped, stirred, and scrubbed. Through the swinging door, I could hear the clinking of glasses and bursts of laughter. Then came the smell of garlic shrimp and warm brie. They were serving appetizers. I paused while blanching the green beans, waiting for someone to call my name. I waited for Gordon to say, "Mara, come get a plate." I waited for Tessa to remember I existed. Nobody came. The laughter grew louder. They were eating. I was working. I turned back to the stove to hide the sting in my eyes. I reached for the butter in the fridge and stopped. Taped to the stainless steel door was a yellowed piece of paper, edges curling with age. It was a list titled, "Whitlock House Rules. Those who live here must contribute." It was old, years old. But there, at the very bottom, was my own signature, in shaky cursive from when I was 17. It was a contract I had been forced to sign to keep a roof over my head back then. Now, it stared back at me like a brand. It was a reminder that I was not a daughter in this house. I was an investment that had not yet paid off its debt. Dinner was a masterclass in exclusion. I watched from the kitchen doorway as the guests and my family passed heavy platters of the food I had spent 4 hours preparing. When the noise finally died down and forks started scraping against china, I was allowed to approach the buffet. There was nothing left but the carcass of the turkey and the burnt scrapings of the stuffing. I ladled a spoonful of dry, stringy meat onto a salad plate because the dinner plates were all in use. I sat on a folding chair in the corner of the dining room. I had barely taken my first bite when Gordon cleared his throat. "Eat fast!" "Mara," he said, not looking up from his meal. "We need the table cleared for dessert in 15 minutes. Don't make the guests wait." I put my fork down. The food turned to ash in my mouth. I was not a daughter here. I was the help. Only less respected because the help got paid. "Mara," Tessa called out from the main table. She was beaming, her face flushed with wine. "Be a sweetie and bring the extra gravy boat over here. Miles needs some for his potatoes." I stood up. The gravy boat was heavy, porcelain, and filled with scalding hot liquid. I walked toward the table. Tessa was seated near the edge of the new cream-colored rug Gloria had been bragging about for weeks. As I approached, I noticed Miles holding his phone up. The red recording light was blinking. "Careful," Miles snickered. "Don't trip. I was careful. I was steady." But as I leaned in to place the boat on the trivet, Tessa spun around in her chair. It was a sharp, unnatural movement, her elbow jutting out with calculated precision. She struck my forearm hard. The boat tipped, brown, thick gravy cascaded down the front of my dress and splashed violently onto the pristine white rug. "Oh my God!" Tessa shrieked, pressing a hand to her mouth in a performance worthy of daytime television. "Mara." "Look what you did!" The room erupted in gasps. I stood frozen, the hot liquid burning my skin through the fabric of my dress. I looked at Gloria, waiting for a mother's instinct to kick in. I waited for her to ask if I was burned. Gloria stared at the rug. Her eyes narrowed into slits of pure venom. "You clumsy!" Gloria hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "That rug cost $2,000. Get on your knees, now! Scrub it up before it sets." "But Mom..." "It's burning my leg," I whispered. "I said get on your knees," she shouted, slamming her hand on the table. The silence that followed was suffocating. Slowly, I lowered myself to the floor. The shame burned hotter than the gravy. I grabbed a cloth napkin and began dabbing at the stain. Above me, I heard a snicker, then another. Miles was standing over me, the phone lens pointed directly at my face. "Say cheese! Cinderella!" He laughed. "This is going on the community page. Local disaster ruins Thanksgiving. Everyone needs a good laugh. Click." My pocket vibrated. Then it vibrated again. And again. A continuous stream of buzzing against my hip. He had tagged me. He had tagged my friends. He had tagged the Cedar Haven community group. I kept scrubbing. My hands were shaking. "Gordon." A deep voice broke through the humiliating sound of Miles's laughter. It was Mr. Henderson, an old business associate of my father. He looked down at me, then at Gordon, his expression tight with discomfort. "This seems a bit much. Perhaps let the girl get cleaned up." I stopped scrubbing for a heartbeat. Someone saw me. Someone saw this was wrong. Gordon waved a dismissive hand, taking a sip of his wine. "Oh, ignore her. Bob. Mara's just sensitive. She likes the drama. She's used to cleaning up her own messes." Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud crack. It was a quiet, final severing of a tie I hadn't realized was strangling me. The coldness spread from my chest to my fingertips, steadying my shaking hands. I stood up. The napkin in my hand was heavy with brown sludge and grease. The room went quiet as I towered over the table. Miles was still grinning, looking at his screen. What Miles asked, looking up. "You missed a spot over there by the..." I dropped the sodden, dirty rag directly to Miles's plate. It landed with a wet thud right on top of his mashed potatoes, splattering gravy onto his expensive shirt. You clean it, I said. My voice was low, devoid of any tremor. Miles jumped back, knocking his chair over. Are you crazy? You just ruined my dinner, Mara, Gloria shrieked. What the hell do you think you are doing? I didn't answer. I didn't look at them. I turned on my heel and walked straight past the stunned guests, through the kitchen, and out the back door. Behind me, Gordon was shouting my name, ordering me to come back and apologize. But for the first time in my life, his voice sounded like it was coming from a very great distance. I walked into the cold night air and didn't look back. The drive to Maple Ridge took 45 minutes of silence. I did not turn on the radio. I did not cry. I just drove, watching the yellow lines on the highway blur into a continuous stream of light. My mind was not racing. It was disturbingly clear. I was done. When I pulled into the driveway of the small, cedar-shingled house, the porch light flicked on immediately. Aunt Valerie and Uncle Jonah were the black sheep of the family because they were poor. Or at least that was what my father always said. In reality, they were the only ones who were happy. Valerie opened the door before I could knock. She saw the dried gravy on my dress, the red blotches on my neck, and the rigid set of my jaw. She did not ask what happened. She did not ask why I had left Thanksgiving dinner before the pie was served. Come in, she said softly, pulling me out of the cold. 10 minutes later, I was sitting on their worn velvet sofa, wrapped in a thick knitted blanket. Jonah had placed a mug of hot cocoa in my hands and retreated to the kitchen to give us space. The warmth of the ceramic cup seeped into my frozen fingers. I'm sorry for barging in, I said, my voice raspy. I couldn't stay there. Valerie sat on the coffee table in front of me, forcing me to look at her. Her eyes were kind, lacking the critical glint that my mother's always held. Mara, she said, placing a hand over mine. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone. Not to them. Not to me. That was the sentence that broke the dam. It wasn't a sob of despair. It was a release of pressure. I took a shaky breath and nodded. Then, the sadness hardened into something useful. Something sharp. I have to show you something, I said. I pulled out my phone. I've had a joint account with Dad since I was 17. They made me keep it open every month. On the 1st, I transfer $800. They call it rent for the years they raised me. They said they were saving it for my future wedding or a down payment. I opened the banking app. I had been afraid to look at it for months, trusting them blindly. I tapped the screen and turned the phone toward Valerie. The balance was $342. Where is it? Valerie asked, her brow furrowing. You've been paying that for over 10 years. There should be tens of thousands of dollars in there. Look at the transaction history, I said, pointing to the scrolling list. Carnival Cruise Line, $2,000. Apple Store, $1,500. Sephora, $400. They spent it, I whispered. They didn't save a dime. They used my money to fund the lifestyle they pretend to afford. I looked at the screen, seeing the dates. The cruise was booked 2 days after I transferred my bonus last year. The electronics were bought on Miles's birthday. They viewed my income as their allowance. I have a secret, I told Valerie, my voice steadying. I opened a high-yield savings account at a completely different bank 5 years ago. I put every spare cent I had into it. They don't know it exists. Good, Valerie said. That's your leverage. No, I said. This is my exit. I tapped the transfer button on the joint account. I moved the remaining $342 into my external personal account. Then, I went to the settings and canceled the automatic transfer scheduled for tomorrow morning. I'm taking what's left, I said, and I'm downloading every single statement going back 7 years. I spent the next hour saving PDFs to my cloud drive. Every theft, every misuse, every lie was now documented in black and white. Valerie watched me work, her expression grim but proud. When I finally put the phone down, she squeezed my shoulder. Listen to me, Mara, she said firmly. They are going to come for you. They will scream, and they will lie. Don't argue with them. Don't try to explain yourself. Just record every text, every call, every email. Silence is your shield, and evidence is your sword. Don't argue. Record. I repeated. It sounded like a prayer. I went to the guest room and plugged my phone into the charger. It was already lighting up with missed calls from mom and home. I didn't answer. I didn't feel the usual panic rising in my throat. I simply reached out and turned the device completely off. For the first time in 32 years, I lay down in a bed, knowing that no one was going to bang on the door to demand I clean up a mess I didn't make. I closed my eyes and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I turned my phone on at 7 in the morning. It was a tactical error. The device vibrated so hard against the nightstand I thought it might crack the screen. The notifications stacked up in a blur of rage. They had tried to use the joint card. The first text was from Tessa. Card declined at the gas station. Very funny, bitch, fix it. The second was from Gloria. You stole our money. Put it back immediately, or I am calling the police. You are a thief. There were 17 missed calls. They were not worried about me running away. They were worried that their ATM had stopped dispensing cash. I sat on the edge of my bed and typed a single response. I did not justify. I did not apologize. That is my money. Period. I pressed send. Then I went to the kitchen to make coffee. I thought that would be the end of it for the day. I was wrong. 40 minutes later, a thunderous pounding shook my front door. It was not a polite knock. It was the sound of someone trying to break the wood. My apartment complex in Cedar Haven was usually quiet, a place for young professionals and retirees. Now, it sounded like a war zone. Mara. It was my father's voice, booming and unrecognizable with fury. Open this damn door, right now! We know you are in there! Tessa shrieked. Open up and give me my money. I froze in the middle of the living room. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I crept to the peephole. They were all there. Gordon was red-faced, pounding with his fist. Gloria was pacing, looking ready to scratch the paint off the frame. Tessa was kicking the bottom of the door. I'm calling the super, Gloria yelled, loud enough for the entire floor to hear. My daughter is a thief. She's robbing her own parents. Doors down the hallway began to open. I saw my neighbor across the hall peek out, looking terrified. I did not open the door. I retreated to the bathroom, locked that door too, and dialed 911. Emergency, the operator said. I have 3 people trying to break into my apartment, I said, my voice trembling but clear. They are screaming and kicking the door. I'm afraid for my safety. The next 10 minutes were an eternity of noise. The pounding did not stop until heavy boots echoed in the hallway. Police. Step away from the door. The silence that followed was instant. I unlocked the bathroom door and crept back to the peephole. 2 uniformed officers had backed my family against the hallway wall. I opened the door just a crack, keeping the chain latch on. Miss Whitlock, the taller officer, asked. Yes, I said. Gloria immediately burst into tears. It was a terrifying transformation. Her face crumpled, her shoulders slumped, and she looked like the picture of a worried mother. Oh, officer, Gloria sobbed, clutching her chest. Thank God you are here. We are just so worried. Our daughter, she is having an episode. She stole money from us and ran away. We just want to make sure she doesn't hurt herself. The officer looked at me, his expression softening with doubt. Is this true, ma'am? Are you in distress? She's lying, I said, my voice cold. They are here because I closed a bank account that was in my name. They are harassing me. She's unstable, Tessa shouted. Actually, a voice came from the hallway. We all turned. It was the neighbor from apartment 4B, a young guy I had barely spoken to. He was holding up his cell phone. I've been recording for 5 minutes, he said, looking at the police. They weren't doing a welfare check. They were kicking the door and screaming about money. The old guy threatened to break her face. The officer's face hardened. He turned back to Gordon. Sir, I'm going to need you to lower your voice and step outside. "You are trespassing and disturbing the peace." They were escorted out. I watched them go. Gordon looked back at me, his eyes promising retribution, but he said nothing. When the hallway was quiet, my next-door neighbor, Renee, knocked softly on my open door. She was a retired teacher with silver hair and a spine of steel. She held a plate of store-bought cookies. "May I come in?" she asked. I nodded, undoing the chain. She set the cookies on the counter and looked at me. "I heard everything," Renee said. "I just want you to know that biology is not a life sentence. Family does not have the right to ruin your life." After she left, I sat down at my computer. My hands were finally steady. I created a new folder on my desktop. I named it Evidence. I dragged the screenshots of the text messages into it. I typed up a timeline of the morning's events while my memory was fresh. I researched the local laws and confirmed that in our state, I could record conversations if I was a party to them. I was done being a victim. I was building a case. But as I looked at the blinking cursor, a cold realization settled in my stomach. They had failed to get the money back by force. They had failed to shame me into submission at home. They needed leverage. They needed to hurt me where I could not ignore it. I looked at my work laptop sitting on the desk. They were going to come for my job. Northlake Benefit Solutions was supposed to be my sanctuary. It was a place of beige walls, quiet humming servers, and the comforting predictability of contract analysis. I had spent 4 years building a reputation here as the woman who never missed a deadline and never made a mistake. I thought my professional life was an island that my family could not touch. I was wrong. It started at 10 in the morning. I noticed my colleague, Sarah, glancing over her cubicle wall at me, then quickly looking away when our eyes met. Then I saw a notification pop up on the company's public Facebook page, which I managed as part of the outreach team. 1 star. Do not trust this company. They employ thieves like Mara Whitlock who steal from the elderly. My stomach dropped. I clicked the profile. It was a fake account, but the wording was Tessa's. I scrolled down. There were dozens of them. Miles and Tessa had tagged the company in a boycott post, urging strangers to flood our reviews. They were calling me a predator. Then the phone at my desk rang. It was not a client. It was the receptionist, her voice tight. "Mara, HR needs to see you. Now!" I walked into the glass-walled conference room. Derek, my department manager, sat at the head of the table. Monica, the human resources director, sat opposite him. There were no smiles. On the table lay a printed transcript of a phone call. "Sit down, Mara," Monica said, her tone perfectly polite and terrifyingly cold. "I can explain." I started. "We just received a call on the main switchboard," Derek interrupted, tapping the paper. "A Mr. Gordon Whitlock. He identified himself as your father. He claims you embezzled retirement funds and that he wanted to warn us before you did the same to our clients." The air left the room. My father had called my employer and accused me of a felony. "That is a lie," I said, my voice shaking. My father is retaliating because I separated my personal finances from his. I have bank statements to prove that the only money involved was my own earnings. Monica sighed, taking off her glasses. "Mara, we aren't a court of law. We don't want to be involved in your family drama. However, Northlake relies on trust. When our public page is being flooded with accusations of theft and our switchboard is taking calls about fraud, that becomes a company problem." "Are you firing me?" I asked. "No," Derek said. "But we are placing a formal note in your file regarding reputational risk. If this continues, if this bleeds into our client relationships, we will have to re-evaluate your position." I looked at them. They were not evil people. They were just corporate officers protecting the brand. But in that moment, I realized how fragile my independence really was. One phone call from a vindictive man could erase 4 years of hard work. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. Instead, I remembered Aunt Valerie's voice. Record. I took a deep breath and sat up straighter. I understand, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. I would like a copy of that call log and a transcript of the complaint my father made, for my own legal records. And I would like you to send me an email summarizing this meeting and the specific nature of the complaint. Monica looked surprised, but she nodded. I can do that. I walked back to my desk, feeling the eyes of the entire office on my back. I forwarded the emails to my private address immediately. I saved the screenshots of the reviews. I was terrified, but I was not helpless. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Aunt Valerie. Come over tonight. There is someone you need to meet. The message felt like a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. I worked until 5 o'clock, keeping my head down, ignoring the whispers. I walked out to the employee parking lot. The sun was setting, casting long, dark shadows between the cars. I reached for my door handle and stopped. Stuck to the driver's side window with heavy duct tape was a piece of notebook paper. The handwriting was jagged and rushed. Pay up or lose everything. There was no signature. There didn't need to be. I ripped the note off the glass, my fingers trembling. I looked around the darkening lot, half expecting to see Miles's truck idling in the shadows. There was nothing but silence. I got into my car, locked the doors, and placed the note on the passenger seat. They had crossed the line from harassment to warfare, and I was done playing defense. I arrived at Aunt Valerie's house at 7 o'clock sharp. Sitting in the armchair, where I usually curled up with a book, was a woman who looked like she could cut glass with her gaze alone. Audrey Klein was in her early 40s, wearing a sharp navy blazer and holding a tablet with the precision of a weapon. She was an old friend of Uncle Jonah, but there was nothing casual about her demeanor. She was a shark in a silk blouse. Sit down! Mara, Audrey said, gesturing to the sofa. Jonah gave me the broad strokes. Now I need the details. Show me everything. I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder I had named Evidence. I felt a strange mix of shame and vindication as I walked her through the files. I showed her the joint account statements, highlighting 10 years of monthly transfers labeled rent and savings. I showed her the withdrawal history, where my parents had drained the funds for cruises and designer handbags. I played the video of the Thanksgiving incident, and then the video my neighbor had taken of them pounding on my door. Finally, I showed her the email from my HR department and the 1-star reviews Miles had orchestrated. Audrey watched it all in silence. She did not gasp or offer pity. She analyzed. This is good, Audrey finally said, tapping her stylus against the screen. We have a multi-front war here. First, defamation per se. They are attacking your professional livelihood with false statements. That is actionable. Second, tortious interference with a business relationship regarding your job. Third, civil harassment. And finally, the money. She looked at the bank statements again. They treated this account as a slush fund. Audrey noted. If we can prove the oral agreement was that this money was for household expenses or savings for you, and they used it for personal luxury, that is conversion or unjust enrichment, we can sue to get it back. I felt a surge of hope, followed immediately by the crushing weight of reality. I can't afford a lawsuit, I said, looking down at my hands. I have my savings, but if I lose my job, I need that money to live. We are handling it, Uncle Jonah said from the doorway. I looked up. He and Valerie were standing there, holding hands. We have set aside $5,000, Valerie said firmly. We were saving it for a renovation. But this is more important. You are going to win this, Mara. Consider it an investment in our family's dignity. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. I nodded. Okay, I said. What do I do? Do I block their numbers? Absolutely not, Audrey said, leaning forward. That is the biggest mistake people make. If you block them, you stop the flow of evidence. I want you to let the phone ring, let the texts pile up. Don't answer. Don't defend yourself. Every time they scream, every time they threaten you, they are handing us a brick to build their own prison cell. She slid a contract across the coffee table. "This is a limited scope representation agreement," Audrey explained. "I will draft a cease and desist letter tonight. It will demand they stop the defamation, stop the contact, and preserve all financial records. It will scare them." I signed the paper. The scratch of the pen against the page felt like the sound of a lock clicking into place. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like I was wearing armor. The letter went out the next morning via courier. Audrey had predicted that they would react poorly, and she was right. They did not go quiet. They exploded. 2 days later, my phone pinged with a notification. Miles had posted a new video on his social media. It was titled, "The Truth About My Ungrateful Sister." I watched it with Audrey on a video call. Miles was sitting in his truck, looking red-faced and furious, holding my legal letter up to the camera. So my sister got a lawyer. Miles ranted, shaking the paper. "She says we stole her money." "That is a lie. That money was for the house. Mom and Dad used it too." "Well, it doesn't matter what they used it for. It was family money." "She thinks she can sue us for spending money that was owed to us." Audrey let out a low, satisfied laugh on the other end of the line. "Did you catch that?" Audrey asked. "Catch what I asked?" "He just admitted the money was designated for the house," Audrey said, her voice sharp with triumph. "And then he immediately admitted they spent it on other things. He just contradicted their entire defense that it was a gift. He is not just a bully. Mara, he is a liability, and he just became our star witness." The discovery phase of a lawsuit was not the dramatic shouting match I had seen in movies. It was a quiet, suffocating avalanche of paper. Audrey unleashed a torrent of subpoenas. She demanded bank records, credit card statements, text message logs, and email histories. She stripped my family's privacy away layer by layer until their entire life was spread out on a conference table in her office. To make sense of the chaos, Audrey brought in Mallory Sykes, a forensic accountant who looked like a librarian but hunted for missing money with the ferocity of a bloodhound. Mallory sat us down 3 weeks later. She did not smile. She simply pointed to a color-coded chart projected on the wall. "It is a classic bleed pattern," Mallory said, her voice dry. "You put money in on the 1st of the month. See this blue bar? That is you. Now look at the red bars on the 3rd, the 5th, and the 10th. That is them." I stared at the screen. My contributions, labeled house fund in the memos, were immediately siphoned off. "They didn't use a cent for the mortgage," Mallory continued. "The withdrawals match up perfectly with credit card payments for the Sapphire Spa, upgrades to business class on Delta, and high-end electronics. They were living a 6-figure lifestyle on a 5-figure income, and you were the gap filler? But that is not the worst part," Audrey interrupted. She slid a thick document across the table. It was a property title search. Gordon took out a second mortgage on the Briarwood house 2 years ago, $150,000. My mouth went dry. What, the house was almost paid off? Why would he do that? He listed the reason as business investment, Audrey said. "But we ran a check on his so-called business. It doesn't exist. There are no filings, no tax returns, no revenue." Audrey pulled out another sheet. It was a copy of Gloria's written responses to our interrogatories. In legally binding writing, my mother had sworn that the house was debt-free and that their finances were stable. Gloria doesn't know. I realized, feeling a cold chill. She thinks they are rich. She has no idea he leveraged the roof over their heads. "We found the transfer records," Mallory added. "Gordon wired the entire loan amount to a private equity group based in the Caymans. It was a Ponzi scheme. The fund collapsed 6 months ago. He lost everything, every single dime." The picture suddenly snapped into focus. The anger at Thanksgiving, the desperation for my money, the frantic need to control me. It wasn't just cruelty. It was panic. They were drowning, and I was the life raft they were trying to puncture. Then came the digital evidence. Miles had tried to be clever. He had deleted the videos from his social media after receiving the cease and desist letter. thinking that would erase the proof. He was wrong. We subpoenaed the platform's metadata, Audrey said, and we have 3 saved copies from viewers who downloaded it before he scrubbed it. He can't claim he never posted it. We have the timestamps, the geolocation, and the caption where he admits to the intent to harm your reputation. But the final nail in the coffin was Tessa. She had claimed in her statement that I was clumsy, that I had tripped and spilled the gravy myself. Audrey played the video from my neighbor's hallway camera on her laptop. It was grainy, but clear enough. She paused the video frame by frame. Frame 1, I was walking steady. Frame 2. Tessa turned in her chair. Frame 3. Her elbow jutted out, not naturally, but with force. Frame 4. Impact. It was undeniable. It wasn't an accident. It was battery. We have them on defamation, fraud, and assault, Audrey said, leaning back in her chair. This isn't a family dispute anymore. Mara, this is a criminal enterprise run by amateurs. I looked at the mountain of evidence. I saw the lies, the theft, and the betrayal quantified in spreadsheets and timestamps. I felt sick. But strangely, I also felt free. I wasn't the crazy one. I wasn't the bad daughter. I was just the victim of a long con. They are going to fight this, I said quietly. They have too much pride to fold. Audrey looked at me, her eyes dark and serious. They don't just have pride. Mara, she said, they have debt. They are about to lose their home, their reputation, and their retirement. They are not just bad people. They are desperate, and desperate people will do stupid things. The silence from the legal cease and desist letter did not last long. When they realized they could not scream at me directly, they decided to scream to everyone else. The campaign began on a Sunday. My cousin, who I had not spoken to in 3 years, blocked me on all social media after posting a status about ungrateful children abandoning their elderly parents. Then came the whispers from the local church group. People I had known since Sunday school started crossing the street when they saw me in town. I did not fight back. I did not post a defense. I went to work at 8 in the morning. I went to therapy at 6 in the evening. For the first time in my life, I was learning to breathe without asking for permission. My therapist told me that silence was not weakness. It was a boundary. But the attacks were getting smarter, or so they thought. On Wednesday, Monica from Human Resources pulled me into her office again. She closed the blinds. I shouldn't be showing you this, Monica said. Her voice lowered. But we received 3 anonymous emails this morning sent to the general inbox. They claim you have a substance abuse problem and that you are mentally unfit to handle client data. My hands clenched in my lap. You know that isn't true. I do, Monica said. And I know these aren't from random strangers. The emails mention a specific scar on your knee from when you were 7. Only family would know that. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. They were trying to starve me out. I called Audrey immediately. She did not sound worried. She sounded like a hunter who had just heard a twig snap. Do not delete them, Audrey ordered. Forward everything to me. Every time they touch your job, they are committing tortious interference. They are literally documenting their own malice. Let them dig the hole deeper. That evening, I found a letter in my mailbox. The handwriting was soft and loopy. It was from Gloria. My dearest Mara, it read, Please come home. We miss you so much. We can work this out. We are a family, and families forgive. I stared at the paper. A month ago, this would have broken me. I would have gone running back, begging for a hug. But as I held the letter, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Gloria, sent 2 minutes ago. Pick up the phone. You ungrateful little brat. You are killing your father. I placed the letter next to the phone and took a photo. The contrast was sickening. One hand held an olive branch. The other held a knife. I uploaded the photo to the evidence folder and felt nothing but a cold, hard resolve. Then Miles made the mistake that would end them. He went live on social media again, clearly intoxicated. He was ranting about how lawyers were scammers and how the legal system was broken. I watched the recording that a friend sent me. "She thinks she is so smart," Miles slurred, pointing a beer bottle at the camera, talking about her savings. That money wasn't hers. That account was... It was always meant to pay off the house debt she owes us that I froze. He had just admitted on a public forum that the money I thought was for my future was actually designated to pay their debts. He had confessed to the financial scheme. Got him. I whispered to the empty room. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Hello, is this Mara Whitlock?" A rough male voice asked. "Yes." "Who is this? I used to work with Gordon at the plant," the man said. "Look, I shouldn't be calling, but I saw the stuff your brother is posting online. You need to know. Your dad is in deep. He owes money all over town. The bank is foreclosing on the Briarwood house in less than 30 days. They aren't just mad at you, kid. They are drowning. They think you are the only life raft they have left." I hung up the phone. The air in my apartment felt heavy. They weren't just cruel, they were terrified. They needed my money to save themselves from the consequences of their own greed. Audrey called me the next morning. Her tone was grim but ready. "We have a court date," Audrey said. "The judge granted an emergency hearing because of the harassment at your workplace. It is happening on Monday." "I am ready," I said. "Good." Audrey replied, "Because you need to prepare yourself. They are cornered animals now. They are going to put on one final show." The county courthouse smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. It was a sterile, unforgiving environment that stripped away the pretense of family loyalty and left only cold, hard facts. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Audrey. Across the aisle, the Whitlocks were arranged like actors in a tragedy. Gordon sat with his chest puffed out, trying to project authority, but his collar was too tight and his face was a blotchy red. Gloria was trembling, her hands twisting a handkerchief in her lap. Tessa was dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue, already performing for an audience of none. Miles was slumped in his chair, scrolling on his phone, as if he still did not understand that the laws of the internet did not apply here. Audrey did not waste time with emotional speeches. She stood up and adjusted her glasses. "Your Honor," Audrey said, her voice cutting through the room like a scalpel, "we are not here to discuss feelings. We are here to discuss theft and systematic harassment." She projected the financial exhibits onto the screen. It was the same chart Mallory had shown me, but enlarged for the court. The blue bars represent Mara Whitlock's monthly contributions of $800, totaling over $90,000 over 10 years, Audrey explained. The defendants claim this was rent. However, the red bars show immediate withdrawals for luxury goods. There was no mortgage payment made from these funds. Not once. Then, she played the video. The silence in the courtroom was absolute as the sound of my family laughing at me filled the air. On the screen, I was on my knees, scrubbing the rug while Miles taunted me. The judge, a stern woman with graying hair, watched the screen with an unreadable expression. When the video ended, the silence that followed was heavy. I could hear Gloria swallow. Gordon could not take it. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "She lived under my roof," Gordon shouted, his voice cracking. "She ate my food. She owes us that money. You don't get a free ride in this world, Mr. Whitlock." "Sit down," the judge said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of the law. Unless you can produce a written lease agreement or a contract signed by the plaintiff agreeing to these terms, your outburst is irrelevant. "Do you have a contract?" Gordon opened his mouth, then closed it. He sank back into his chair, defeated. Audrey then called Miles to the stand. He walked up with a swagger that evaporated the moment he was sworn in. "Mr. Whitlock," Audrey said, holding up a printout of his social media post. "You captioned this video with the phrase, 'Time to expose the trash.' You also tagged her employer. Why?" "It was just a joke." Miles muttered, shifting in his seat. I was just venting. Venting, Audrey pressed. You tagged Northlake Benefit Solutions. You encouraged your followers to leave 1-star reviews. Was that a joke I wanted? I wanted to show her company who she really is, Miles stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. I wanted them to know she's difficult. So you admit you intended to damage her professional reputation, Audrey asked. I guess thank you, Audrey said. She didn't need anything else. He had just confessed to tortious interference. Next was Tessa. Audrey played the hallway security footage. It was slowed down to half speed. The courtroom watched as Tessa's elbow shot out, striking the tray. It was deliberate. It was malicious. I slipped, Tessa whispered, her face pale. The video shows you were stationary. Ms. Whitlock, Audrey said. You looked, you aimed, and you struck. That is battery. Tessa burst into real tears this time, hiding her face in her hands. Then Audrey delivered the final blow. She projected the documents regarding the second mortgage and the foreclosure notice. Your Honor, Audrey said, turning to the judge. The defense argues that their actions were born out of parental discipline. We submit that their motive was financial desperation. Gordon Whitlock is $600,000 in debt. He has lost his savings in a fraudulent investment scheme. They did not harass my client because she was a bad daughter. They harassed her because they needed her money to save themselves from bankruptcy. The air seemed to leave the side of the room where my family sat. Gloria let out a small, strangled gasp and looked at Gordon. Gordon stared at the table, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The truth was out. They were not powerful patriarchs or aggrieved mothers. They were broke, desperate liars. The judge adjusted her glasses and looked over the bench. I have seen enough for a preliminary ruling, the judge said. I am inclined to grant the plaintiff's request for a permanent restraining order. Furthermore, regarding the financial restitution and damages for defamation, I suggest the defense counsel prepare for a significant judgment against their clients. We will move to the sentencing phase next week. The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. On the other side of the aisle, my family sat frozen, looking as if the oxygen had been sucked out of their lungs. They had come here expecting to bully me into submission one last time. Instead, they had just watched their entire world collapse. The final judgment was not just a victory. It was an eviction notice for their ego. The judge ordered my parents to repay $93,000 in misappropriated funds, plus another $50,000 in punitive damages for the defamation and the assault. On top of that, they were liable for every cent of my legal fees. Audrey did not waste a second. Before the ink was dry on the verdict, she filed an abstract of judgment and placed a lien on the house in Briarwood. It was a strategic stranglehold. They could not sell the house, refinance the house, or borrow against the house without paying me first. Then came the twist that nobody saw coming, not even Audrey. The bank triggered a foreclosure proceeding on Gordon's secret second mortgage. He had missed 4 payments in a row. He was not just broke, he was underwater. 3 days later, on a Friday evening, the doorbell rang. It was pouring rain outside, a heavy, gray deluge that blurred the streetlights. I looked through the peephole. I expected to see Gordon red-faced and screaming. I expected Miles with a baseball bat. Instead, I saw 2 soaked, shivering old people. I opened the door. Gordon and Gloria stood there, water dripping from their noses. They did not try to push past me. They looked small. Mara, please, Gordon said, his voice cracking. We just want to talk. I have nothing to say to you, I said, keeping my hand on the door frame. We are sorry, Gloria sobbed, clutching her purse to her chest. We are so sorry, baby. We didn't mean for it to go this far. We were just stressed. Please, let us come in. You can't come in, I said. Gordon took a step forward, and for a moment, I thought he was going to attack me. Instead, his knees buckled. He grabbed the doorframe to hold himself up, looking at me with terrified eyes. The bank is taking the house, Gordon whispered. We have a buyer lined up for a short sale. It is the only way to avoid bankruptcy, but the title company won't close the deal because of your lien. You have to sign a release. Please, Mara. If you don't sign, we lose everything. I looked at them. They were begging. They were practically on their knees. A month ago, this sight would have torn me apart. I would have signed anything just to stop their pain. But now I saw the truth. They weren't sorry they hurt me. They were sorry they got caught. If you want to negotiate the lien, I said, my voice steady, you call my lawyer. Everything goes through Audrey. I want a written admission of guilt and a permanent non-disparagement agreement before I even consider it. We don't have time for lawyers, Gordon cried out, desperation replacing his humble act. If you don't sign tonight, the bank auctions the house on Monday. Don't you care about your family? Are you really going to let us be homeless? You made me homeless in my own house for 30 years, I said. We are your parents. Gloria wailed. You can't just disown us. I looked at them one last time. I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. I didn't get disowned. Mom, I said softly. I just resigned from my position as the help. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I did not listen to the weeping on the other side. I walked back to my living room and sat on the couch. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a text from Audrey. Garnishment order executed. The first payment of $40,000 has been transferred to your account from their remaining liquid assets. It is over. You won. I stared at the screen. Then, another message popped up. It was from a new number, but I knew who it was. Please forgive Mom. We are scared. I looked at the words. For years, I thought forgiveness was a tax I had to pay to be loved. I thought if I just forgave enough, they would finally see me. Now I knew better. Forgiveness was a choice, and right now, I chose myself. I pressed the power button and turned the phone completely off. The room was quiet. The rain beat against the window. But inside, I was finally warm. Thank you so much for listening to my story and going on this crazy journey with me. I am dying to know where you guys are tuning in from, so please drop your city or country in the comments below because I love reading them and seeing how far these stories travel. And hey, if you want to support the channel, please make sure you subscribe to Victoria Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button so we can get this story out to as many people as possible. Catch you in the next one.